All right, thank you for joining us for another segment of our WCA Cybersecurity Educational Seminar. As I have stated in other segments, we had of course hoped to have held these in person, and unfortunately with the pandemic ongoing, we have recorded these for everyone to watch at their leisure. So I'm Marcy Reynolds. I'm one of the Government Affairs Associates with the Wisconsin Counties Association. In this segment, we have with us Rita Reynolds. She is the Chief Technology Officer with the, not with the Wisconsin, but with the National Association of Counties. Rita oversees the internal technology operations of NACo, and as well, she leads NACo's technology programs and initiatives for counties. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Rita for her time and her expertise in providing this information for us. She can be contacted through NACo's website. You can find her contact information there, but she's also provided her contact information in this presentation. So you can feel free to contact her if you have questions. And as always, the Wisconsin Counties Association staff, myself, Chelsea Fibert, and any of the government affairs staff are available to answer questions as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Rita and her presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Marcy. I greatly appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to speak to all of you. Would have loved to have been in person, and hopefully somewhere down the road we will be able to meet back together again in person. So I'm going to go through some information today about cybersecurity, but I'm going to do a little bit of introductions and talk about the cyber trends and some policies. Really want to leave you with some practical tips and resources that are available to you. But before we get into all of that, let me just share a little bit more about myself. I have spent over 30 years, probably more like 33 years now in local government, and I have enjoyed every minute of it. I spent 20 years as the CIO at the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, and doing very similar work that I do now at NACo. I really enjoyed working closely with the county IT directors and CIOs, and also with our state folks. When I decided to make this jump to NACo, I was excited because I knew that I could take what I had learned over the years and apply it at a national level. And very quickly, after I started last summer, we developed a technology blueprint for an approach to uniting county CIOs and IT directors. And at the same time, really took a look at our internal operations at NACo and made some changes very quickly, which have proved to be beneficial, especially during this COVID-19 situation that we're in. And then I always like to throw a couple facts out there about myself. I like to get to know folks, and I am a runner, although I will say these days an indoor runner on a treadmill, and I can't, and emphasis on can't, eat chicken. So sometime when you want to ask me about that, feel free to follow up. It is an unusual situation, I realize. But so a little bit about myself. I want to spend a few minutes reminiscing. And for those of us that are a little older, I remember what it was like back in what we called Y2K in the year 2000. I had 3 young children, and I did have a pretty good regiment and process for my day. I'd wake up, of course I would hit the alarm because we still had the alarms by our bed, and I would drive to a conference or a meeting with little assistance from any type of smart device because we didn't have those. You know, ate my lunch, came home, did my workout in the evening, pretty routine. And from a technology perspective, just think with me for a few minutes. Some of you might recognize the Nokia device there. That was an early version of a smartphone. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have Facebook. The smartphone, kind of, you could call it that, but it was more from a text perspective. You were able to do texting, but the numbers and letters were all together, and it was pretty archaic compared to today. We didn't have Twitter. We had the paper newspaper, and you still received that newspaper on your doorstep and sat down, opened it up and read it. No Google Maps either. especially anything on your phone. Some of us had websites. Not every county had a website in the year 2000. And if you're curious as to what your county website looked like, or if you had one, just go to Google what's called a Wayback Machine, and there's a link that will take you to a site where you can put in your county website, and it will show you the first occurrence. It's a pretty neat historical site that's been out there for years. And then finally, Wi-Fi didn't exist. You could do some sort of internet connection, but it was, I can hear the noise in my head when you would connect, and you could get some sort of email, but it definitely isn't what we have today. So think about it. What was life like in the office? Windows XP and Microsoft, the Office version 2000. Our phone systems were still the old PBX. A matter of fact, some of you may still have PBX systems in place. And then the first BlackBerry was starting to come out. And I remember using that device as well from a work perspective. As you can see in the picture there, some interesting icons on there that you could click on and perform tasks. Very different from what we have today. And what is it we have today? Smartwatches. I actually took my watch off, and my iPhone watch, which you may or may not be able to see in the video here, but I don't want to say live and breathe by that, but I do. And we have Alexa, excuse me. We have, of course, remote teleworkers predominant in our society now. Smart cars. I don't know if anyone on this listening to this particular video or this recording, whether you have one or not, but I do know some folks that do. And as we like to refer to the cloud, the smart cloud. It is so different, so very, very different. And with that comes cyber. With it comes so many more exposures than what we had back in 2000. I could have listed out 20, 30 different links here, and as you have time, you'll have access to this PowerPoint, I'm sure, but these are some recent events in the past couple months that pertain to counties. And it's scary to think about what ransomware is doing and how it can take down your system so quickly. And as you can see, Cook County, Texas, the sheriff's office was just hit over the past few days, and they're working to see what they're going to do, whether they're going to pay the ransom or not. That's a whole different presentation that I'm sure at some point in the future I'd be more than happy to share. But cyber is real. It's not going away, and there's just so many more touch points, which is really what today is all about. So I want to talk about those challenges, and in a in-person or even a virtual world, I would be saying to you, what are your challenges with cyber today? And we would have some audience interaction. I know that as you're reading this question, we'll just spend a minute on this slide. When I look at challenges of today, I actually have to compartmentalize and say to myself, what were the challenges before COVID hit, and what are they now? And one thing is pretty common, and that is the end user. No matter whether it's 2010, 2015, before COVID, during COVID, after COVID, our end users are our greatest exposure. And we can put all the technologies in the world, but if we're not focusing on educating end users and a continual education process, not a once and done or even once a year review of the acceptable use policy. It really needs to be continual and at the forefront of all that we do when we're protecting the county network and the county assets. So let me just talk about the trends in general. I always like to put the end user piece out there first and foremost. And now I want to talk about some trends that we were experiencing before COVID, and then we'll talk about afterwards and during. When COVID just started to hit, we were looking at the situation of more and more folks, of course, working from home. You wanted to keep folks working. And so that before COVID, you had some telework, but not quite a bit. And you had VPN in place and some other tools that you allowed some of your employees to use. But then we hit COVID. And so now your IT directors and CIOs were faced with getting everyone back to work in their home environment. We have a tech exchange that I'll talk about in a little while that has about 440 or so county IT directors and CIOs on the exchange. And those were the emails going back and forth. How are you handling licensing? How are you handling the VPN? You've been asked to help folks stay working that normally can't do their in-office work, and now they're at home. What type of work projects can you help set up for them that they can continue to work? A lot of focus on archiving projects, digital archiving that took place with some counties that you'd been putting off because you didn't have the time or the resources, but now you had staffing that could do those projects. Other projects, such as a new ERP system or changes to your infrastructure, have been put on hold, and in some cases indefinitely. And then finally, as we progress through COVID, NACo has put together some resources, and I've listed them there. And I just ask that, as you have time, take a look at those. The Tech Exchange has a software guide. I just talked with a state association yesterday where some of the counties took advantage of some of the free resources out there. And now we're coming up on August when some of these end, and they're looking to either procure the resource or watching to see if the software providers are going to extend the free use. Now, let me just talk about some of the challenges. During the COVID-19, and especially even now, security, of course, was first and foremost. How do we ensure everything stays secure? We want to make sure VPN is working, and we also want to continue to remind our folks that are now the county staff that are working from home of important cyber hygiene. And so a number of counties have renewed their phishing tests that they would do with county staff, phishing emails that are not real, but using tools such as KnowBe4 or Cofense or Wombat. Those are subscriptions out there. Wiser is another one, WIZER, that provide videos. And what they found was it was very helpful because the bad actors are capitalizing so much on the COVID-19 information. So we all know about Johns Hopkins and other sites. Well, the bad actors, as we call them, started replicating some of those emails and sending those out in mass to citizens across the world. So the renewed phishing tests were very important. And a couple other challenges, of course, remote support. You're now not going to be in person to help your staff figure out a problem with their computer, and there are tools that allow county IT staff to interact remotely. But in some cases, some of the connectivity was interfering with their ability to use those tools. And connectivity does play a major role right now across the United States. We have pockets of areas in our United States that don't have good connectivity or broadband access. And so employees are having to find other ways to connect to the county network. And maybe they have access to the internet, but when they try to VPN in, they run into difficulty. And then finally, virtual public meetings. Very, very, very active conversation on the Tech Exchange of what are you using to conduct those public meetings. Everything from WebEx to GoToWebinar, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, of course, was in the spotlight and still is in some cases when it comes to security. And all of the above are being used. And in some cases, multiple tools within one county because of your requirements. Your elected officials may have one requirement, and then your courts may have another. So those have all proven to be challenges which make the cybersecurity infrastructure and defenses a little more difficult. So I always like to say with challenges are opportunities, and Albert Einstein had this quote, "In the midst of every crisis lies a great opportunity," and that's what we have before us today, and a lot of innovation that has happened over the past couple of months and continues to happen. It's pretty exciting to watch the development, the use of the collaboration tools within a county. I have had multiple counties say to me, we went from a very low usage of Microsoft Teams, for example, to 400, 500% increase. NACo experienced it ourselves. I looked at the statistics in the dashboard, and it was incredible what our utilization of Teams looked like in March. And then you get to May 1st, and it was like this. And of course, the numbers supported that, how many different conversations were happening, how many team meetings, and as I said, the chats, how many files are being loaded within Microsoft Teams. It really has helped us stay connected, just like it has with your county staff. And whether it's Teams or another tool, the utilization has skyrocketed. So, keeping security in mind, one of the things that I worked closely with some CIOs with back in end of March, beginning of April, was to put a guide together, and it is on our Tech Exchange available for you to download. And it went through each of the different tools and what are the security settings you need to be concerned about, because you want to be able to be flexible and allow collaboration to take place, but you also need to keep in mind security. And at the same time, open records and how to deal with public comments. All of those requirements play into the type of tool that you're going to use. And I recommend highly that, talking to your peers, talking to other counties, and how they've worked through some of these situations. I've even heard some counties that have used Facebook Live as well as YouTube, and being able to use that for some of their public meetings and control some of the comments that are coming in within the requirements. And then eliminating desktops has been another opportunity. Many counties still have employees that use desktops rather than laptops or surfaces or notebooks or notepads. And what I heard repeatedly was, we had probably more than we should have still using desktops, and they had to put together what was called desktop to go, where they actually boxed up the desktop with the cables and instructions and let the employee take the desktop home and sit up at home. So the opportunity there is that instead of ordering replacements of desktops as the refresh cycle is taking place, let's order laptops. And a lot of counties have started transitioning to those mobile devices. And in the long run, it is a little bit easier when you think about from the cybersecurity perspective to ensure that updates are happening rather than transporting a desktop or a desktop to go home and then making sure that that particular device can be connected to the network. And normally I'd probably stop right now and say, are there any questions? So feel free to jot those questions down, and you can email them to me as you have time. My email is at the end, and it's rreynolds@naco.org. A couple lessons learned through all of this. Staff can adapt. Staff equipment definitely needs to be more mobile, and I don't see that changing or going away. So as you start to work on your strategy going forward, look at your replacement, your refresh cycle, and where you can replace the desktops with a laptop. And then broadband is still a major issue. I know a number of counties took a look at how FirstNet is being utilized in their county with emergency services, and whether there is an opportunity to take some of the services you're providing and classify them as emergency. A couple examples there, of course, fall under the children and youth and mental health area. And if you want more information on that, again, please send me an email. And then finally, we are working closely with policy, with the legislature to help improve the broadband situation. There's been some progress with some current legislation that just passed out of the House. HR 2 is the number, and now it's moving over to the Senate, and we have high hopes that that is going to pass. It's making some changes to what's called the E-rate, which is a reimbursement program mainly for connectivity with education, but broadening its use for county government. All right, so let me move into more specifics about cyber priorities and then talk about best practices and practical tips for all of you that are listening to this webinar. First of all, these are the 7 priorities that came out of COVID-19 technology discussions. Number 1 is that counties really want to have what's called a SIM device in place, security information and event management. Think of it similar to your car and the dashboard that where you see different icons or different sensors that will turn on, your seatbelt's not on, tire pressure is low. That's kind of what a SIM is in the technology world, and it reads all kinds of information from different logs and then gives your IT support areas where they need to address or focus on. Another priority area is security training. And I'm not talking about end user training yet, but specifically security training for your IT staff. And then of course the security training for end users, as I talked about earlier. Endpoint security, this gets to antivirus and that transition to a different type of antivirus that is more immediate in nature and that can deal with what's called zero-day attacks. I already referenced the IT staffing and technical training. Critical technology infrastructure improvements. So how does that relate to cyber? We have firewalls and different devices that help protect the county network. And many of those need to be replaced or upgraded because the technology has evolved so fast, but it's costly to do. And so it is a priority for counties to put that before their commissioners of here's how we need to replace certain devices or move some things to the cloud. Security services is a priority, especially in smaller counties where you don't have the security resources in place, the staffing to keep on top of the security trends and cyber trends that are out there. And so there are a number of vendors in that space or technology partners. And counties are looking for the best services to support what they're doing and what they need to do to stay protected. And then finally, telework improvements. There are 2 camps here. And when I say 2 camps, I'm referring to the one camp where employees need to be in the building and need to be working and physically visible. And then there are those, especially when you talk to IT folks, where we can do our job anywhere. Caseworkers tend to say the same thing. Probation officers, we need to be out in the field a lot. Can we just go home and finish our paperwork? So we are seeing counties more flexible in that area, but as a result, wanting to nail down policy and procedures more definitively so that those hard questions of is my staff working can be answered in a more definitive fashion. So what I want to do now, as I said, the challenges before COVID, digital data had exploded, and I want to focus a little bit on that. We have webinars, conference calls, virtual events, online collaboration, the web traffic, and social media. And I did a presentation a month or so ago specific to data, and we really have to be mindful about the data that your employees are engaged in and utilizing. Because COVID was so fast upon us, you just wanted to make sure that staff were working and that you had them engaged and that they were communicating back to the county efficiently and as quickly as possible. But as a result, all of this exposure has shown us the need for overall data management and data governance. So just to go back to this slide for a minute, I definitely don't want to leave out the importance of data governance. We still have a lot of work to do there, and at some point down the road, I'm sure that Marcy may have me back, and we can talk more about an approach to enterprise data governance. All right, so let's switch gears here, and let's just talk about national policy. I want to just cover a few items for you to be aware of and to think about when it comes to cyber. I use the acronym GDPR a lot, and I get a lot of blank stares from folks. So over in Europe, about probably 2 or 3 years ago, well, more like 3 or 4, they passed what's called General Data Protection Regulation. There's a little image up in the right-hand corner that talks to that for you. And one of the keys here that's so different from the rules on privacy and protection in the United States is this right to be forgotten. So what the GDPR has stated, that any European citizen has the right to say to you as county government, remove my data. There's no reason to keep it any longer, remove it. Website tracking, for example, is a big one. Some of you have a lot of tourism, and in that event, you may have folks coming from another country, and so GDPR would apply. So we have that national policy out there, but we don't see a lot of county reaction to it unless you're in a state such as Florida or California. California passed a similar version a couple years ago, and overall, these data protections are much more stringent and have a lot more requirements on county government than normal data protections that you're used to and data privacy, say from HIPAA, for example. So what I did was a little bit of a study and a review, and to say, is this going to come to other states? And there's been a number of policies that have been presented in other states. They haven't gone anywhere yet, so we're keeping an eye on it. What we have seen is that every state has breach notification, and it varies from state to state. So I've included a link there, and ideally would love to see something standardized across the United States, but I don't think we're going to get there anytime soon. That breach notification, what it means is that you have a certain time period to notify citizens if their data has been breached. In Pennsylvania, it's as soon as possible. There were efforts a couple years in a row to change that to 7 days, and the county CIOs and IT directors work closely with the state agencies to explain to the legislature why 7 days was unreasonable. Sometimes it can take 30 days or more to determine if there really was a breach of data. You might have an incident, for sure, but was the data really breached? And it takes time to determine that, and then whose data was breached. So we're keeping an eye on what the trends are at the national level. I've shared a couple, like I said, a couple links here and some images for you to take a look at in terms of privacy law, and you definitely can take a look at Wisconsin and what's there as you have time. All right, so practically speaking, I'm going to jump to the practical approach for a few moments here, and some of it you may already be aware of, but we really need to hone in on it. First and foremost, a county should have an acceptable use policy, standalone, separate from your HR handbook, and a sign-off with an annual review. We have a number of those policy templates in the Tech Exchange library. I'll explain that in a few minutes. But if you don't have a standalone, you really need to get that in place as soon as possible. Secondly, you need IT confidentiality. That means that within your county department or your IT department, there should be a separate policy that holds your IT staff to a higher standard. We see data all the time. We see information all the time when we're troubleshooting. And as an IT person, I'm aware of that, and I need to know that I need to hold that in confidence. Privacy policy, which many of you have because of HIPAA, but make sure that it's been reviewed for recent changes in terms of that the whole privacy discussion. We're tightening it up, not loosening it up. And then finally, mobile device management is a key one, because we have smartphones and our county employees are using them all the time, whether it's personal or county provided. If they're getting email on that phone, you need to have a mobile device management policy in place to state that you have the right to wipe that phone if something happens to it. And there is software you can procure to assure them that you're not going to wipe their information, their personal information. But if that phone is stolen, they may want everything wiped anyway. So again, this is some basics. Some other basics, and I can tell you these have saved counties over and over. Multi-factor authentication. If you have email, which you all do, but if you have it in the cloud, you have Office 365, MFA is built in. It's very easy to add that second layer of protection so that if I go to a device and I log into my email, I'm going to get a text message on my phone, and I have to put that code into the email screen. That saves you in the long run, because if someone's trying to break in that's from another country or across the United States, they're not going to have your cell phone. Email banner. I see this, almost always on county emails that we're receiving, but it's just a little banner that comes across the top or at the bottom of your email that says, be careful what you're clicking on. That's a paraphrase of what that language might say, but it's a good visual reminder. In terms of your employee staff computers, staying cyber safe means they should never have local admin rights. And if you think about it from your personal device, if you have a computer at home that you own and you want to download something, you can do it. It's going to load for you, it's going to run. Your work computer shouldn't allow you to do that. IT has a set of applications that every staff person is allowed to use, and that's what they should only be allowing. So if you haven't done it or need to ask the question of your IT support, do we have local admin rights on our computers? And if there's exceptions, you need to do away with those exceptions. There should not be anyone, even commissioners or anyone else, that is allowed to download and run executable files on their local machine. Automatic updates. We have the tools now, most of us in the IT world, to force those updates for the operating system and virus patches automatically, both on your local machine as well as on your servers. And we should never be trying to bypass those. And then finally, another best practice is what's called access control process. Who gets access to what? When an employee starts, you probably have a checklist that they fill out. When they leave, you probably have a checklist that you're checking off to make sure you're turning off all their access. Do you have a process in place when an employee moves from one position to another or from one department to another? Suppose someone is moving from the jail as an officer, but now is going to probation as a probation officer. They don't have, and nor should they have, the same access into the systems that they had before. So having that access control process in place will help strengthen your cyber defenses. All righty, moving on here, background checks. I remember years and years and years ago where I was trying to really get this in place in a organization, and it was like, why do we have to do that? And I'm like, it's a good best practice. Well, in the county government now, it's much more accepted, and every employee should have a background check run on them. And keep in mind, there's different levels, and there's also different requirements. So CJIS, the Criminal Justice Information Sharing, for any of your employees that are in the criminal justice world, whether it's in adult probation or jail or prosecutor's office, they need to have a higher degree of background checks conducted before they start in their position. And
Did we run into a technical difficulty?
Yeah, she mentioned that there was some issues.
Hopefully we can get Rita reconnected here in a second.
Give her a few minutes, yeah, or a few seconds.